Hi, I'm Jack Berry, and we're with Jerry Matthews today, and we've done a series of Jerry's courses. It'll take us a couple of years to do every one of them because he's done so many courses in Michigan. But we've had a nice time talking about the courses, seeing the courses, and right now we're going to Manistee and to the Manistee National Golf Resort and the Cutter's Ridge Golf Course. And Cutter's Ridge is because of the lumbering industry. Is that right, Jerry?
That's what my memory tells me, that the Cutter's Ridge is a part of the Cant Hook, name of the other 18 that's there. So,
And that was that must have been some time ago, because by looking at the pictures, those trees have all grown up again. What happened?
well, apparently somebody didn't possibly widen the fairways far enough, but knowing they do that, I still believe in the concept of leaving trees if they're there, because you can always take them out, but you can't replace them. But they do tend to grow in toward the fairways, the sunlight, and the water and the fertilizer.
Well, I saw a quote a while ago by Pete Dye, by one of your fellow designers, and he said, "Golf isn't a fair game, and so why should the golf course be fair?" And I think you have kind of a different opinion of that.
I have a different view of that same subject. The basic philosophy that I got from my dad was that they should be fun, they should be fair, but they should be challenging. So there's a lot of leeway for a lot of things in there, but golf courses cut out of the woods do tend to grow in.
Now, how do you go about with that course, planting holes? And then you have something else in there, I think, some kind of watery substance?
Topography and wetlands. Well, the trees are just a third factor. I mean, you have a topographic map which has the wetlands on it, but the trees are just an added, and I love them. It's a third dimension that gives you height and it gives you separation of fairways, which I really like. And you have to put that all on paper, based not on the trees but on the topography and the wetlands. They're there on this job, a lot of them. But the trees are just an overcover that you've got to cut a hole in to get the golf hole created. So that, we look at the tree cover not as deciding the golf hole, but as something that needs to be removed. And at that point, you don't know what the golf hole is going to look like till you clear the fairway. You simply don't. Well, you have an idea, but you don't really know what trees are going to remain, because there's trash trees, dead trees, and shrub trees and brush that you all have to clear out. But at that point, you begin to determine how wide the fairway is going to be and what trees create the edge, particularly on doglegs.
What are the good golf course trees on as an added asset to the course? What are the good trees?
The good trees in Michigan, the good trees are the white pines, in my opinion, and the oaks and the maples. There's three basic trees that we have that really that will live a long time.
And you have had a lot of them there at Cutter's Ridge?
A lot of at Cutter's Ridge, and we had a lot of wetlands at Cutter's Ridge, and I can't remember the exact percentage, but I would think that at least 30% of that 120 acres is wetlands. That's a lot.
Now, how did that all come about in our state? How do we have so much wetlands?
Well, there's that glacier concept that came through there, and I stand back in amazement sometimes when I look at this state and see what you can get within 400 yards or 300 yards. But the glacier left the ridges and the potholes, and I guess, as I understand it, I call them potholes. They were icebergs or something that melted last after the glacier retreated. Some of them very big, some of them very, very small. But the state of Michigan decided they could regulate all of them. And that's a design challenge.
And so how do you go around that?
I mean, we want high ground. In other words, we can't touch the wetlands, in theory. That's the state. You don't want to touch it. So our first goal is to not worry about it at all. We don't want it. But in reality, you can't help it when you have that much acreage or that much wetlands. So it becomes simply a part of the puzzle of golf course design, which is length, topography, soil types, wetlands, and trees. Trees become a part of it when they're not thick.
Now, how do you fit that puzzle together to get 18 holes? Well, how many acres did you have to work with?
We had about 120, so if you take 30 of that out, you've got about 90 acres. The golf course gets shorter for starters, and we don't want that. But that's what you're faced with. You simply have less acreage to work with. So we need to maximize the wetland acreage that we can play golf over. It's not illegal to shoot a golf ball over wetlands. So it's trying to make that concept of utilizing the wetland acres alongside a golf hole or right in front of the tee so they can hit over it, or maybe right in front of the green so you make it a problem shot on the green. But making it fair all this time, and particularly this golf course, it became very difficult to do that. So we do get a wetland application for a permit to change some of it. For every acre that we fill in to make golf playable, we have to create 2.5 acres of new wetlands.
How do you do that?
Dig a hole. Well,
the water comes up.
In the water, yeah, you can dig. We have to get filled somewhere, so you're excavating somewhere, and that eventually becomes wetlands at a man-made wetlands. But it allows us to fill in some critical areas that we want to do to make the golf hole playable. And that was a challenge.
And, the challenge is getting over hazards. You have a few cross hazards, or a few that you have to carry.
We have
How many golf balls do I need to play there?
18. Well, no, you need more than that.
Per hole.
Per hole. No, I don't like to hear that. Anyway, it came out more difficult than I would like it, and but it's playable and it works, and it's a pretty good golf course.
How did you get into Manistee? How did that job come about?
Manistee came about because a group of local people got together and wanted to build a golf course. Private individuals, and we met with them several times, and it was a great group of people. And they hired us to do this, and make a long story short, things went bad financially, and a different group took it over, and they should not have been in the golf business at all. And then it went into court, and then it came out of there, and then the current Osprey group took it over. It was not designed to be a full 18 on the west side of the highway because the clubhouse was going to be on. We had a separate 18 across the road. When Osprey took it over, we had to put a tunnel under the road, and that became a part of the Manistee National Golf Development. They have two 18s there. So the one that I did was now on the west side of the road with no clubhouse, no putting green, no nothing. So they put a cart tunnel under the highway, and we just converted it to an 18-hole all-out golf course.
The aim was to bring people up from below to play the course in the summertime.
Well, I think the aim of the original group was they just I think wanted their own golf course. Had a little housing on it, but not very much. But ultimately, I think it became just part of a golf resort, which is obviously trying to draw people to the Manistee area and to their location. They put up a hotel, and so it became a part of that complex.
Now, how do you do your planning for that? You start with where do you get the topos?
Well, you get that from the state. Back then, we had to go down to you'd have them flown by a private firm that did aerial photography, and that's what they did for a living. And that's where I got all the topographic maps from my early days. You had to pay for them, but you'd go down and pick out your site, and you could have them fly your site specifically. You give them the scale you want and the acres you want, and they go fly it and connect with a man on the ground who does the ground elevations, and then they put it on a huge photogrammetric machine, and you get a topographic map and a picture, an aerial picture with all the trees and wetlands and everything. So now it's a lot simpler now.
Why is it simpler now?
Because you can get the pictures on the internet or on Google Earth or whatever these things are, and you get the topographic maps from the whole state's flown now. So
then how do you start laying it out? How do you get your drawing, or where do you start and where do you turn? How do you do all that?
there's 120 some acres that's this golf course we're talking about, this wetland wooded golf course. And you find a clubhouse site. We do more than one layout in the office when we start. We can put the clubhouse anywhere we want to, but it has to make sense somehow. I want an elevated location for a golf course. So that's why we had the clubhouse right by the 30, I think that's N37, the highway there. And you start from there. Once you find that logical spot, which is just by the highway, you don't need an entry road in, you've got the parking, and then you have a clubhouse site, and then you have to get a putting green in there, and you have to get 1 tee, 10 tee, 9 green, 18 green, ending up in that area. That's normally the toughest part, is to do that and stay within, reasonable distance of the clubhouse. The other thing we need that I forgot to mention, you have to have a driving range, or we like to have a driving range. So that goes into that clubhouse area. And the range itself takes up about 10 acres because we want enough room to hit a golf ball without trying to. So then we have a big, nice putting area there. So that you start from that, and you've got 14 holes left. But really, I try to maximize what nature has put there. I select the best sites for a par 3, a par 4, par 5. I use the land to the best of my ability and put those holes there. And I work trying to link those up into an all-out 18 that comes back, or 2 separate 9s that come back. But my basic function always is to use what nature's put there to get really good, beautiful golf holes, visually beautiful golf holes.
And you always want 9 to come back to the clubhouse.
Normally we do, yes. Normally we do.
For all the 9-holers, of which there's a growing number these days.
There is, yes. But
Myself included.
Manistee National, it really was one of the more difficult ones. That much wetlands, it just makes it difficult to make the holes work and to get good golf holes and to make them fair. And we had some of them, I frankly would say, might not be fair. I think it could be made that way easily. But we had a limit on what we could fill because of the limitation we had to replace the wetlands that we took.
Wow, that sounds like a large job.
Well, it is a difficult job, but I like it. It's a challenge.
Well, you've been doing it for a while.
It's a challenge to do that, and I really like it.
Well, you've been doing it for a while. And as you've said before, that there's nothing better than being able to walk out there and say, boy, this is great, and I'm working, and is that right?
That's correct.
Now, with all the wetlands, and I know that you are a #1 fisherman, were you able to catch anything in around there?
Not on that golf course. The wetlands are probably best described as a depression in the ground, and maybe 2 foot, 1 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot deep, with clay on the bottom. Yeah. It's just a clay layer that has good soil all the way around it, but it's the clay soil on the bottom holds it up. So it can be only 1 foot deep. It's still wetlands. It doesn't have to have any water on it at all. The wetland regulations are defined by also the type of vegetation growing on it, which is pretty frustrating. So it doesn't have to have water at all. So no, there was no fishing available on that particular golf course.
Now you've as we've mentioned, you've worked all across the state in different types of land, and now you've got we've been talking about this nicely forested piece of property by Manistee, and you must have a couple of favorite holes on that course. I think you mentioned the 18th hole. Tell us about that. 18
is one of my favorite holes because we had such a challenge building that hole. And again, the wetlands, it was the out of bounds on the left, and it dropped about 20 feet down to the wetlands on a pretty severe slope. We had to create a plateau to play golf on. So that's not one of those holes that you find that you say, this is a beauty from tee to green. We don't have to move much soil. We had to move a lot of soil on that hole to make it playable, to get a plateau wide enough to get a golf shot on in a fair sense. But I think a lot of it, and looking back at it and seeing it now, that when you clear a golf course, particularly that one, which is basically wetlands, and the trees weren't nearly as big then, and it left it very much more open than it is today. And that's true of all golf courses, but I think this one, it left it much more barren looking. And looking at it today, it's a much more beautiful golf course than it was the day we built it. And the trees have just filled in beautifully, and they're bigger, of course, and older, and tighten it up a little bit, but it's a beautiful golf course.
Well, people play golf to have a little challenge, and obviously you've got a nice challenge at Cutter's Ridge at the Manistee Golf and Resort.